Right.
Dang, Mike left. I was gonna pick on him. Mike takes nice notes too. Mike Jenkins. Of course. Okay, my two private chats did not work. Okay, I can pick on Ned. I can bribe you later. Can you help take notes? Sure. Yay.
I'm bribe resistant. Highlight that.
I don't know if that's a good thing or not, Hank.
You highlight that and it's very dark in the room.
Yeah. Okay, I think we're all set, and it is 1 minute past, so we shall go ahead and get started. Welcome to the Trusted Execution and Environment Provisioning Working Group. If you are not expecting to hear Teep, you're in the wrong room. Let's see, Thursday. So by now you should be well aware of the note well. So I'm not going to go through the standard practices for the IETF. You can read them on your own. I have been asked to reiterate the meeting tips. So make sure for those especially who are here in person to sign in through the Meet Echo. So you can either use the on-site tool or the little video icon, and that will give you the ability to get the blue sheet sign in, if you will. Do get on the queue and Meet Echo, because that's the way we can respect those who are remote as well, and I can honor people on the queue that way. Keep your audio and video off so that we don't get double audio. And then make sure that you're wearing your masks, even if you come up to the mic. So the only ones that can choose to take their mask off is those that are coming up to present. For the remote participants, make sure that your audio and video are off unless you are in the queue and you're recognized to speak. And it's recommended that you use a headset just to allow for the audio to work better. Okay, so quick review. I don't know why the PDF, next time I'll turn the PowerPoint to PDF so it formats properly. Key points of the code of conduct. I mean, we're a small group, we're all friendly here, but this is just to say treat each other with respect and courtesy while we're in the room. Keep the discussions professional. Okay, so with that, thank you to our AD and to Ned for helping take notes. I do encourage others also to look at the hedge doc and help us if you see that our helpers cannot keep up with the discussions and to capture it. Okay, so for the agenda today, we're in the agenda bashing portion. So Dave, are you going to cover for Ming?
If he's not ready to present, then my assumption is that I'm doing his lunch for him.
I don't see him on.
Then assume that I'm presenting his lunch.
Okay, great. So we'll spend some time on the comment resolution that has been happening in the architecture, as that is now in the AD area review process. Then Akira, you'll present the updates on the hackathon. And then Dave, you're back on to discuss issues on the, well, not really, well, issues, but also progression on the protocol specification. And then Pengling, I think you are remote. Um, We gave you some time to provide the use case that's coming from confidential computing.
Yes, I'm
So,
remote. Thank you.
great. Okay. So with that, any comments, updates to the agenda? If not,
Does that fill up the entire time, or is there?
I think there was, if I did the math, there was 10 minutes of slop. Yeah, I've learned to leave like 5 to 10 minutes just because of transitions, because I'm like 30 seconds over my slot. Okay, so with that, if there are no comments, Dave, you want to come in and
Okay, my name is Ming for this presentation. And since I'm on the X, I'm going to be able to breathe. Sorry. All right. Ming and Ming. Okay, go ahead. Next. This is the architecture document. All right, so as a reminder of the timeline, right, we've gone through working group last call. We've had AD feedback from Ben that was then updated in draft 16 and 17 and 18. And you can see various other reviews that have happened. Thank you to all those that have submitted reviews. Next slide. All right, so section 3.3 was one that had a comment in it that we made a change to since working group last call. That one said, weak security has been posing threats to critical infrastructure. Russ had a comment about suggesting minor edits to help the reader understand that this is not talking about network infrastructure. So you can see draft 17 since last IETF was updated with the wording on the bottom, which talks about proposing infrastructure, i.e. assets that are essential for the functioning of a society and economy. And I think Russ acted that was acceptable. So yeah, nodding. Okay, great. Next. It's just confirming working group consensus that we didn't break working group consensus, right? That's what we're doing here. So 9.3, it said it compromised might drop or delay messages, and Russ pointed out that it should also mention replay, and so we added that in there. So it says drop replay or delay messages. Next. Root Ca versus Trust Anchor. Okay. So 9.4 said a root CA for Tams certificates might get compromised, or a certificate might expire, or a trust anchor other than a root CA certificate may also expire or be compromised. Okay. Russ said, what's the difference between a root CA and a trust anchor? They're usually synonyms. Explain if there's a difference here, right? And so you see a little clarification exchange between Ming and Russ there. When it's a certificate, it doesn't have to be a root certificate. It could be an issuing CA, while it isn't common practice. And Russ pointed out, I think the point about root certificate in all situations is not very helpful. Please add that to the document. And so the text now says, adding the point in bold, it can be a non-root certificate when it's a certificate, right? So it's a certificate if it's a certificate, but if it is, it doesn't have to be a root certificate. Okay, so Russ nodded. Okay. Next. Yeah. So raw public keys are certificates. When they're certificates, they could be a root certificate or an intermediate certificate. Yeah, all those are legal ways, as long as you have something in your trust anchor store that you can chain up to. Okay, next. Okay. All right. Trust anchor definition. Trust anchor represents an authoritative entity via a public key and associated data. The trust anchor may be a certificate or it may be a raw public key. Okay. So we're just talking about. Carl commented, and the main part is in bold there, where he actually suggests alternate text, right, where the trust anchor may be a certificate, a raw public key, or other structure as appropriate. Might be better to leave open the possibility of constraining a trust anchor, right? So you can see he commented on, associated data and so on. So 17 says the following: the trust anchor may be a certificate, a raw public key, or other structure as appropriate. It can be a non-root certificate when it's a certificate, right? And so if you have something else that fits into the same overall bucket as a trust anchor that you can chain it up to that has some security principle associated with it, then that's okay. You're not constraining trust anchor to it must be a certificate or a public key, even if those are the only things that we actually use right now. So, okay. All right, 4.4, personalization data. Old text. Implementations must support encryption of such personalization data to preserve the confidentiality of potentially sensitive data contained within it, and must support integrity protection of the personalization data. Okay. Now, talks about integrity protection. Right? Why not say that an implementation must support mechanisms for the confidentiality and integrity protection? Also, it seems like the suit firmware encryption document actually talks about that, and should you just reference that? Okay. Ben, our AD, commented on the draft 17 version. We may want to split the confidentiality and integrity protection guidance into separate clauses or even separate sentences to be clear about what behavior is required. And so we did that. And so 18 actually has two separate sentences. Implementations must support encryption to preserve confidentiality of such personalization data, which may potentially contain sensitive data. Implementations must also support mechanisms for integrity protection of such personalization data, right? So the addition of the first sentence was in response to Russ. The splitting into two sentences for clarity was in response to Ben. Okay, keep going. Okay, other nits. So Russ sent a bunch of other great nits that we incorporated. Some of those are covered here. I don't know that all of them are. I don't think we covered typos and stuff. So we broke up a long sentence into two sentences. The need to address, okay, so I guess you can read the wall of text. Russ has already done this, but these are, at least the first one was just purely editorial. You can see the fixed in 17, there's the new text there. The problems in the bullets above, on the other hand, require a new protocol. The Teep protocol, this is the motivation text in the introduction, right? The Teep protocol is a solution for TEEs that can install and enumerate TAs in a TEE secured location where another domain-specific protocol standard that meets the needs is not already in use, right? So that's the updated version there. Russ had a comment about App Store versus Trust Anchor Store. It says, is an App Store a place where apps are stored or a place where apps are purchased, right? Because that term could be read as both ways, especially if you're not a native English speaker. The term seems to be used both ways. And in one place, the document's very general by saying an app store or other app repository. And elsewhere, the term Trust Anchor Store is clearly a place for storage of trust anchors. So we added into the glossary an actual definition of App Store, which is an online location from which untrusted applications can be downloaded, meaning it's not the purchased definition in Russ's, it's the storage example, right? And so in that sense, the term store is the same meaning as Trust Anchor Store, right? Now, you may also be able to purchase stuff from a store, but that's not the definition. So, all right. Threat modality. Section 1 said, TEs are typically used in cases where a software data asset needs to be protected from unauthorized entities that may include the owner or pwner or possessor of a device. Now, just some history behind that sentence right there. That sentence originally appeared in a Confidential Computing Consortium white paper and actually had extremely positive feedback from people, including, say, Gartner and stuff, that just loved that sentence, that how that one was phrased. And so we said, okay, great, we'll reuse that same sentence in the Teep architecture document. But then Brendan didn't like that comment and suggested a different way to phrase it. And since we didn't feel strongly the way, we said, fine, we'll use Brendan's wording, that's fine. Where his point is the threat modality is important, the user identity is not. And so we rephrased it with Brendan's phrasing. TEs are typically used in cases where software data assets need to be protected from unauthorized access, where threat actors may have physical or administrative access to a device. So you can argue his definition is actually more precise, and so that's why we accepted Brennan's proposal. Okay. Next.
It's not me, it's just slow. Oh, was
I don't
that
think
it?
that's the last slide.
I
is it?
think that was
Okay, maybe it is the last
one.
slide.
Yeah.
Okay. Those are all the changes to the architecture document. We believe we've completed AD review and everything, and that there are no remaining issues on the document, including from ADs or IETF or anything else. And so we believe it's ready to advance to the next stage. If you go all the way back to the timeline slide, I forget which stage it's currently sitting in the data tracker. Maybe Nancy remembers.
Well, we
Yeah.
have the Shepherd
Yeah.
write-up,
Yeah,
and
that's right.
it is, so Ben was the AD at the time, so we'll look at our
Yeah,
incoming
look at our
AD.
AD to say,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Our current AD.
Yeah.
Yes.
Paul about this AD. So I will just look over what Ben did, but like if you resolved all of Ben's issues, then I'm assuming we'll just move the document forward. So,
Yeah.
Okay.
So please throw it in my queue.
Okay.
Great.
Next up, Akira. I'm getting there. Too many clicks. There we go.
Try to be under time on that one. So we'll go over how it goes.
You were well under time, 9 minutes, so.
Um, well, I think I would like to
Take the time back to the other place.
Put it out.
put it out. Well, yeah, that's how that works. And I'm ready.
Oh,
Yes,
sorry.
Yes, thank you. No. Yes, this is about a hackathon report on Saturday and Sunday. I'm really relaxed talking now because most of the stuff covered is we really had a good progress. And then most of the description in the slides is also covered in David's slides. So yes. Yes, next please. Yes, the objective was getting the stuff changed from one last IETF114 to until to the hackathon started. And initially there was a few lists on the GitHub. And next, please. So the first one was many of the discussion from the update from the last IETF 113 was related to COSE or EAT. And this is the cipher suit, how to handle cipher suit between the TAM and device by reading the draft. And the first one was if the query response have a selected cipher suit, but it's option member, so it could be empty. And then what the TAM could think about it. And yes, this is was updated to the pull request. So the conclusion was with the 4 or 5 people in the hackathon who were implementing the Teep was just TAM will have a able to select one of them. TAMs have sent in the query request. And next, please. The technical details will be repeated in the David's slide. This went this. Yes. So this was how to identify TE information of the Teep agent or Teep device. And this was also went to, yeah, 2 or 3 iteration. Many of the discussion and many of the improvement during the hackathon went to many iteration. So this, please ask the details, go through the details and David's slide for this one. And thank you. Next one. So what was this? Oh, yeah. So the draft until IETF 113 was explicitly was saying in the text of the query response as a evidence, but in the use case, we have a passport model, and we also have a background check model to support attestation, and we wanted to accommodate both. So change the evidence to more generic name as a attestation payload, and then another member adding the attestation payload format to have what kind of attestation payload will be inside attestation payload. Could be evidence or could be attestation result. And yes, this was a bit from many people's discussion whether attestation could be local attestation, remote attestation, and how to put everything in the current Teep draft. And details will be in the Davis slide. Thank you. And yes. So we need a T hardware property and T firmware property for the TAM to distinguish what is implement in a Teep device side or Teep agent side. And yes, the discussion evolved many way in the 2 days while everybody was working on improvement. And portion is in the Davis slide too. It's it will be using manifest and also software version and yeah. So what to detect, not detect, but distinguish what's the implementation of the Teep agent, whether it's using Opti or whatever is it has a SGX, or what kind of the firmware have booted correctly or not. Yes, and I think I said a little bit too much about it, but yeah, it will be. But please cover go through it in the Davis slides, and this one is, yeah, we wanted to make a Cipher suit more generic way, and was keeping from the last time the discussion was getting more precise, and then at the end of the discussion in 2 days was getting more generic, but only end up specifying how to sign on the KOSE. Okay, and next please. Yes, this is the place I need help. So suit manifest GitHub, and also in the Teep protocol, I copy the way how the suit manifest suit manifest GitHub splitting the CDDL format in the draft and the different file from the markdown, because that will be easier to run it with the CDDL tools. And then it helped a lot to catch many of the CDDL format or CDDL grammar error with the CDDL tools. And I put my way of running the CDDL in the appendix. I think it's page 13 or 14 in the slide, but I'm not really sure what is the right way to use the CDDL tools, but at least my way of using it, did catch a few things in the CDDL in the Teep draft and also the suit manifest draft. And we made a pull request. Mm-hmm.
Akita, do you want to take, Brendan is in the queue? Did you
Yes,
wanna-
yes, yes.
Go ahead, Brendan.
Hi. So there was a point raised about the suit manifest draft that essentially said that suit didn't define a bunch of the cozy structures it uses. There is actually a note in the suit draft which explains that you need to concatenate the cozy CDDL to the end of the suit CDDL in order to make it a valid grammar. I'm not sure if this is the right way to do things, but that's the approach that we've taken so far. If you've got any feedback on that approach, or you prefer a different way to do it, then please do let me know.
Hello. Yes. So concatenating with the KOSE CDDL at end of either of the suit manifest CDDL or two protocol CDDL, it should work. I have tried it on both, and it works. And also another file, everything is dependent in these two CDDL file for the suit report CDDL, and some other one had to be concatenated. And for example, suit report does not have a GitHub repository containing CDDL file, so I had to make it manually. So I really don't know what will be the right way. But for the suit manifest, just the KOSE tags was only required 4 line, which is used in the suit manifest. So I just added manually. So, but concatenating entire KOSE CDD is also fine. But I think it would be nice to put it in somewhere in the README or somewhere so the people could reproduce the procedure I'm using or Brandon using it.
Okay. I guess I
Yeah.
should mention as well that the cozy draft does actually have instructions for how to extract the CDDL from it, though it is a little unusual. I haven't seen that approach in any other draft.
Yeah. Okay. And yes, next.
You have Pingling and Michael.
Oh, okay.
Hi.
Pingling is, yeah.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes, we
Yeah,
can.
yeah, how are you?
I think the problem is not about the definition of the codes. And this question has been sometimes, I can't remember it very clearly, but I think the problem is not about how to define the codes, because I defined the codes in the end of the CDDL, but it seems it not work well. Yeah.
Okay. Michael?
Yes, I agree. And you're the person who filed the issue on the GitHub first. Yes.
Yeah.
Michael Richardson. So what I'm hearing is a couple things, one of which is that we're lacking a clear include mechanism in the CDDL, and I think that's you're not the only one. I think that's well known. I don't in other places. The way that I've dealt with this is that yes, put the CDDL file as a separate file, include it from the markdown. There's a markdown mechanism to include. Put the generation of your complete CDDL in your makefile from the markdown. You can append to that, okay? And for the things that are in other repos, well, use curl. Grab it down,
Yes.
put it in your own thing, concatenate it together. That records all the process, and then you may want to check them in because you might not want to depend upon suit having not changed, and you might want to explicitly update it, or the other way around, up to you. But that's what I've done in the past, and so far it's better than trying to pull it out of the file. Just leave it on the disk, and there's also some CDDL tools that will produce C header files, for instance, which I found really, really useful.
Yes. For the procedure, what you just described, some of the CDDL file is not on the GitHub or any places. So just have to the data tracker and read the draft, and then extract inside the CDDL definition from the draft. So, and that's what.
So Michael, again, what I'm actually suggesting is that when that happens, that you go and poke the people in the other place to do the same thing.
To the same, yes.
Right, so that everyone back has
Yeah.
a CDDL file that you can pull out of,
Yes.
Git raw user pages or something,
Yes.
and you'll get the right thing.
Yes.
And I don't think that's a terrible thing, and everyone will be like, oh yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah, and then everybody will be happy. Yes. And also when before running in the CDDL tools, need to concatenate all the CDDL file, and how to order the CDDL file in the order, it changes how to catch the grammar mistake too. So that's something we need to talk with the people in the CDDL tools. That's my impression. And so the summary is, yes, we really got a lot of changes in first 2 days, Saturday, Sunday, in this IETF114. So great progress. Many issues, 11 issues was improved. 9 pull requests was made. And as far as we know, we haven't tried all the implementation yet, but probably it's okay. It's at the moment I could see Cose supporting Cose and Teep protocol is pretty much should be okay. Yes. And the appendix has some few things
Did you want to cover the appendix?
no, just could you go through just showing what's in the page. Yeah, this is this was my procedure was running during the hackathon. So it's yes, probably need to explain have some of the explanation in somewhere in the documentation in the future. Yes. Yes, I think that's it.
That's it?
Yes.
Okay. Great. Thanks.
Thank you.
We're doing good on time. Okay. Yeah, you're up next. I don't know why I have to like click, 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 click. There we go. Oh, you're not Ming.
What's that?
You're not Ming.
I know, that's what I'm saying. My name is Dave Taylor. Even if I happen to look a lot like that other guy named Ming, please don't confuse us. I do want to say that. No, I don't think
Oh. Oh, it might have gotten turned off accidentally. Accidentally. There we go.
All right. All right. My name is still Dave Taylor. Even don't confuse me with that other guy named Ming who looks a lot like me. I will say at the hackathon, I think we have 6 known implementations from 6 different implementers. 5 of them were sitting at the table, Ming being the 6th one who was not at the table that we know of. And so that means that we spent a lot of time talking about what we want to do, and we even made a breaking change there because we all agreed to break our stuff, right? That we would all change our implementations, and so it was very productive. I think for the first time, and I posted this to the list, usually what happens at a hackathon is we come out of the hackathon with a bunch of issues to discuss and to try to figure out what to do. Given that we had all the implementers there, at least all but one of them there, we actually spent a lot more time talking about what the fix in the spec would be and generating the pull requests against the spec. So for the first time ever, we walked out of the hackathon with 0 open issues that didn't already have text in the spec, in the GitHub copy. Okay, never happened before. The disadvantage is we spent less time on doing the actual code for what we did in the pull request, but it does mean that we actually, now of course, that was a statement in time because since then we've had 3 issues come up, right? And so we'll talk about those too, but just wanted to highlight that we felt like we accomplished stuff, and we felt like we were going to make progress, and we felt like the spec was becoming a lot more stable because we were able to walk out of the room saying, I don't know of any open issues right now, and then we filed 3 later, so. Okay, so anyway, the hackathon was a great hackathon. All right.
It was great. And then thank you and Didu and Ken for providing the link. So if you look at the document draft and the data tracker, we did put links to some of the GitHubs and some of the implementations there for you.
We're trying to collect more, so if yours isn't on there yet, send it to Nancy.
Yeah, so send them to, if you have an implementation that you want to share, send them to, my brain's not working, Teep chairs at IETF.com.
Yeah, so some are implementations of the Tams, some are implementations of the Teep agent, and so on. So there's multiple roles, right? Okay. This slide is the things that I am not going to talk about, although Akira talked about some of them in the hackathon stuff. These are things that were already discussed last meeting, that we had resolutions that we agreed on during the last Teep meeting, and we did those. So I'm not going to repeat those in the interest of time. We're going to talk about the things that we didn't already have agreement on as of last meeting. So, but if you have any questions on these, that was in the hackathon where Akira talked about, I think, at least 3 of the ones that are on here. So, okay. So next slide. Now we're going to get to the ones that are the new issues since last meeting, some of which came up during the hackathon, some were previous to the hackathon. The first one was IANA did their early review. IANA's early review said, hey, we see the IANA consideration section has a section that proposes a freshness mechanism registry. Which protocol page on the IANA site has a list of registries, right? A list of pages where each page can have multiple registries on the same page. And they say, which page should this go on? We said, well, there's not currently a Teep parameters page, although there probably will be because we're asking another one. But it's not the right page. So before responding to IANA, we discussed this at the table. And I discussed it with 1 or 2 other folks in the RATS, but not in the RATS working group so far, which is, should this be a Teep page, or is the freshness mechanism actually more of a RATS thing of which Teep uses a couple values out of it? Okay, this notion of freshness mechanisms, we said, may not actually be a Teep protocol specific thing. And should we have a common registry and Teep can just use values out of that registry, just like we do for, say, COSE types and algorithms and things like that, where we use values out of another registry. And so option 1 is to respond to IANA and keep the text of the document as is to say this goes on a new page for Teep parameters, and we've got more than one registry there anyway. And option 2 is to say, let's move that. And so the proposal that Henk made was, let's move that to the reference interaction models. And then in the RATS working group meeting on, what was it, Tuesday or whatever, we actually just,
it was Monday.
we covered this in the open mic section of the RATS working group. Okay. And so what we did is we posted a pull request that removes this freshness mechanism registry from the Teep protocol and instead adds a reference to that draft that it doesn't yet appear in. Okay, so that's in the GitHub copy, okay, which is kind of a dangling reference waiting for the same text to be added into the reference interaction models in rats to then make it be complete so the information isn't lost. So that is the proposal. The draft isn't posted yet. The intent is that if we agree that the things that we've talked about as the proposals that are sitting in the GitHub copy are right, then we'll post the internet draft that matches what's in the GitHub copy. If we say it's wrong, then we'll fix what's in GitHub and then post it. So, okay. So the proposal here is to move it to the reference interaction models document.
Oh, crap.
Okay. Unless we hear objections, since we had all but one of the implementers at the table, and the implementers thought this was a good idea, as well as the author of the reference interaction models, which is the same table. Thank you, Hank.
Sorry, I lost my connection there for a second.
All right, so we'll go on to the next slide then. I'm not hearing any objections there. Next one. Should be on. Okay, so now we're going to get into the attestation category of stuff. Since a bunch of the implementers were starting to work on actual attestation. So one of those issues is this one that's in the GitHub repository. The issue is labeled "may require one more message for attestation." And to explain this one, I want to go back to a slide from IETF114. So the little thing in the box is the actual slide from that presentation. And so you'll see some old labels where it says OTRP right here, right? That's way back in the day where we're using that acronym that's now Teep here, okay? But this was a example flow that is not by constraint. This is to say, here is a way to compose Teep with other things, right? As an example, okay? And in this way of composing stuff, right? You attest, so in between the verifier and the attester, so this part right here is a passport model, right? Sorry, this part right here, you send it to this is a background check model, I misspoke, right? So as the attester sends evidence through the relying party, which is the TAM, off to a verifier. The verifier sends back an attestation result, which says, yep, you're good or you're not good. If you're not good, then of course the TAM kicks off remediation steps to go and do appropriate installs or updates or whatever, okay? But in the case that says, yes, you're already good, there's nothing for you to do, what happens, okay? Here we said, since you're using this in this mode here, if you can pass back the attestation result that says you're good, you can then present that as the passport model to other relying parties. That's what this example is showing, okay? Just a way of getting the passport model for this one with the TAM as being an intermediary in one leg, okay? It's just a way of composing a hybrid and using two different protocols together. If you wanted to do this, okay, you need a way of carrying this attestation result back, okay? And what we observed is that there's no message in Teep to do that, okay? Even though we talked about that we could do this in IETF105, right? So that's what this issue was, okay? So next slide. Okay, so what did we do to fix this? Because we all agreed, gosh, this would be possible, this would be a good thing to do. This originally came up in the context of somebody implementing local attestation with SGX, but we decided it's not specific to local attestation. There's this slide that had exactly the same problem at 105, right? So here's what we did. So this is in the update message, okay? Normally the update message saying, here's something to install or uninstall, okay? But you'll notice that the manifest list here is optional, which means you can send an update message with no manifest list. What does that mean? So I said, well, we can just use the update message to say, well, then you can just include the attestation payload and use the existing message, okay? Just put this instead. So you can do this, you can do them both, okay? You say, you're good, but then here's something else to install too, right? And so this seemed to be the natural way to do it. And so we added these fields here, which match how it appears in the query response message when you're sending stuff to the TAM, okay? And so we took the same definitions for these and copied them into this message. And we said, yep, this seems to be the nice, simple way to do it. That does not require adding any new messages. You're just now able to send a message that you couldn't send before, right? Okay. So that's what we did in the GitHub copy of the spec, if you look there. So I just showed you what the main difference was. Okay, next one, and Akira talked about this one a little bit as far as what the problem was, which is, can you go back for just a second to the IETF 105 slide? Just because I can point to the diagram there for a second. So that's 2 slides back. In there, the thing that goes back and forth between the Teep and the TAM and stuff was either, okay, I guess you don't have to, was either attestation result or evidence, depending on whether you're using attestation.
I'm afraid it's going to crash again.
Okay, don't worry about it. Then don't. You can
This
use
one?
the,
There we go.
you can use the background check model through here, in which case you're passing evidence through, okay? You can also use it in a background check model, right? Just pretend that this was a TAM over here and you're passing an attestation result to it. And so how do you specify which is the case? Okay, you can go forward now.
You want back to the original.
Back to the slide that we're on, slide 8. Yeah, okay. So, and the spec didn't actually say, right? You can kind of infer, right? But it wasn't explicit. And so we added this text. And so here's the rule that we agreed on that says, okay, there's the attestation payload format and attestation payload. Payload format is a media type plus parameters, right? It's like a content type in HTTP, for example, right? Okay, so you can look at that, and if it contains something you recognize as an attestation result, then it's an attestation result. If it's anything else, it's evidence to pass on to a verifier. Okay, and that's because the TAM is going to get attestation results at the end of the day. Either he gets it directly from the Teep agent, or he gets it from the verifier. So he's looking for an attestation result in a particular format. Okay, so he says, if I've already got what I need, I'm done. If I don't have what I need, I'll ship it off to a verifier and ask him, hey, can you translate this into the thing that I need, an attestation result? Okay. So that's what the text now says. Okay. So once you get the attestation result, okay, then we added in more explicit text as to what to do about that. Okay, when you get the attestation result response from the verifier, there's three states you could be in. Okay, either the attestation result response from the verifier says the guy's bad. Okay, in which case you can't trust the rest of the query response, right? Because it came from a Teep agent that could be compromised or could be out of date. Okay, so that means you can't trust the list of trusted components that's in the Teep message. You can only trust what's in the attestation result. Okay, so in this case, well, you could try to trust it, but there's not good security considerations in accepting something that just failed attestation, right? So you can't believe it, okay? So in that case, you can try to update the Teep agent and all the dependencies, even if the Teep agent claims to be up to date, okay? If there's information inside the attestation result that tells you which pieces are good and which pieces are bad, you can use that, okay? But you can't use it just because it appeared in the Teep message. Okay, so that's case 1. Case 2 is where the verifier said the Teep agent is good, you can trust him, meaning that according to the verifier's policy, he's good and trustable, and you can then choose what to do with that information, right? So you can choose to trust him, okay? But the information in the Teep message says that he's out of date, like he's missing some things he should have, or he's saying, I'm done with this thing that I was using before. And so then I can just accept the stuff that's in the Teep message and do updates according to that, okay? And the third case is where attestation succeeded, and the Teep message also just passes policy, nothing to do, okay? So in both of the first 2 cases, you're going to send an update message, but what you put in there is based on different pieces of information. This one is based on the attestation results. This one is based on the Teep message. Number 3, there's no update message necessary. It's nothing to do, other than perhaps pass back that attestation result as shown in the previous slide, okay, if you're in that mode. Make sense? Okay. That was issue 224. Next. So we had this discussion, and I think we even pinged Brendan during the, I think it was during the hackathon, who was online. The suit component identifier isn't unique, is what the label of the issue was. Okay.
Oh, I forgot Daniel's on the queue.
Oh, Daniel's on the queue. You want to go back one, and I'll take Daniel.
So actually, it's just a question that's raised into my mind, and I apologize for not reading the document yet. But when it says, when you recognize the payload as an attestation result, do you mean you have to pass the payload, or do you have an explicit thing that says it's an attestation result or it's an evidence?
The specific media type will say that it's an attestation result. So in this case, the specific media type, there's a media type and parameters. And this references in RATS, there's a document that's proposed as a working group document that I, on behalf of the Teep protocol implementers, said, please adopt this in RATS, right? It's Lawrence Lundblade's document about EAT media types. And so the media type itself is, EAT, CWT, or whatever, okay? And then there's a parameter that says which profile it is, okay? And in Teep document, we specify an EAT profile. And so the full attestation payload format is, application/EAT-CWT semicolon profile equals the name of the EAT profile. And that means it's an EAT profile for attestation results, right? So that's the one that's well-known. You could define another well-known one in addition to that, but that's at least one example. And so in the implementation, we said, if it's equal to exactly that string, then call our EAT code, else ship it off to a verifier. Okay. All right, so let's go forward. Okay. So in here, what was in the Teep protocol, well, you can see the old, right? There was a list of components which each had a TC info structure. The TC info structure is here in the lower left corner of the slide, which says, here's a suit component identifier and a manifest sequence number. Okay. And so we said, well, consider the case where somebody gets a new component onto the device, such as via sneakernet, it didn't come through the TAM, right? Okay. And so it replaces a previous implementation. One example of a suit component identifier is a file system path. Okay, so let's say you replace the component sitting in a file system path with an alternate implementation. Say you replace my implementation with Akira's. Okay, it's a different component, right? It may have the same manifest sequence number out of the other numbering space, right? It's the other manifest sequence number, whatever. So if it goes in the same file system path and it has the same version number of the other manifest, then of course, if all you do is report this combination here, the TAM can't actually distinguish between the case that it still has the thing the TAM put there versus been replaced by something else that happens to have the same values. So we said, that's bad. Okay, we now fix that. Okay. And so instead we said, well, we looked at the suit report document, which we already referenced, and it has system property claims with the stuff on the right there, okay, which has a system suit component identifier and a set of suit parameters, okay, which includes the ability to have things like a digest. But rather than us defining our own thing, let's just do what we're already doing in the suit reports draft, which we're already using anyway, right? Less code, copy code from here, call that same thing. Okay. So that's why we replaced TC info with system property claims here. And when you're reporting in the Teep message, here's all the other TAs that are installed on my box. Okay. Nobody in queue. Okay, I'll keep going. Issue 189, Akira mentioned reliably getting TE hardware properties. This is the way it's called in the GitHub issue. And so to summarize what this one is, there are 4 different ways to get, that you could possibly, maybe, get properties of the TE in a query response. And so properties of a TE mean things like, oh, is this running, SGX or trust zone? Well, if it's SGX, is it SGX1 or 2, right? Or does it have, monotonic counters or not? Because there's different variations of trust zone and so on. So where do you get that information from? Okay. Well, there's 4 possible answers today. First one is you could get it from attestation results, okay? If there's actually EAT claims, or if you're not using EAT, if you're using, say, SGX reports as a custom format, you could get it in there if it's in there, okay? And of course, that answer for the TAM to get it means that it has to be in the attestation results, okay? Not just the evidence. So it means the verifier has to be responsible for copying the information out of the evidence into the attestation result just so that the TAM can get it, okay? That's absolutely possible, but it places this extra dependency on the TAM doing things that may cause interoperability issues if you're trying to use a TAM that doesn't do that, okay? Or perhaps on a different administrator of the one that's the administrator of the verifier versus the administrator of the TAM, okay? So that's possible, right? But it's this extra burden. So in this case, is there a way to get around that? Second possibility is you could get it out of suit reports, right? Because you can pass that in, when I boot up and I pass stuff to the TAM as a, here's my current state and so on, I could put it in the suit report, okay? Well, this is great if you're generating suit reports as part of your boot sequence, right? Which a lot of the suit implementations do that, especially in the IoT space, right? Brenna's design and the suit reports is to accommodate people that do explicitly that, right? As to say, if I had an error booting or whatever, I can generate a suit report that says that, okay? But doing it here says, well, now I got to require that all TE implementations generate suit reports at boot time or launch time. Okay, boot is not necessarily the right term for like SGX, right? At launch time, load time, and so that may be too burdensome for some TEs like SGX, for example. And by the way, draft 09 of the Teep protocol actually said to do this one, and we said maybe that's too burdensome, especially as we had SGX implementers at the table that said, gosh, this is really hard for me to implement. So we said, okay, maybe that's not the right one either. The third possibility is neither of those, but there's a different field that's the TC list. That's the one I showed on the previous slide. But that's meant for components that can be updated via Teep, right? That's trusted components. It's not for the hardware, right? So it'd be kind of maybe arguably a misuse of that field, because if you can't update it, then maybe it's not a trusted component. We didn't define trusted component as being something that was hardware. We said it's something that can be updated, okay? So that's probably not the right place either. So that left us with some new field, okay? And so that's, as the implementers, we said, this is going to be the easiest one. That's the most extensible because it doesn't have these other dependencies. It works in all these other cases. And so we came up with this one, and it reuses that system property claims that we just showed in the previous slide. So we had a new field that said, you can do this directly and put it in the system property claims. Even if you're not doing a full suit report, you just have that one little snippet that was defined by the suit report spec, but is not really specific to suit reports. So that's what we did. And the implementers, other than all the implementers who were at the table anyway, said, yeah, let's do it this way.
You've got Michael on the queue.
Okay, great. Michael.
Michael Richardson, the mic. So as I understand it, it was too burdensome to do suit reports at boot time. So you're doing a subset of suit reports later on because this new system property claims is out of suit reports, right?
The system property claims we're saying is technically not really specific to suit reports.
Okay, yeah, I get that, but it was defined by that document.
Correct,
Yeah, right.
correct.
Okay, I wonder if you or someone else could elaborate why it's too burdensome. What is it that's making it hard? I just want to understand the decision better, that's all.
You're talking about the
Yeah,
suit reports
why
example?
is that so hard to do for SGX? Is there something I'm missing about this?
I wasn't one of the people implementing that, and so I wonder if anybody else.
I'll
wants to
ask
come
on the
up with
list
some-
then,
yeah,
but I think that there's some valuable insight into what's going on that maybe it's worth having a deeper understanding behind this decision for later on.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure we'll have someone that goes, from risk 5 or something. Well, that's silly. We just do it that way. I mean, but there's probably something deeper there. As I just think we need to capture it.
Fortunately, we did have a risk 5 person at the table, so.
Oh, okay, I don't know.
But yeah, your point is valid.
Some new process are yet to be invented. Okay.
Yeah. Yes, the suit working group is later today. There is a suit hackathon report on the agenda. I don't know that this point is on there, but probably should be, to your point, Michael. So, because I'm sure the suit working group would love to hear that feedback to say, is there something we should do in the suit reports document, right? Is it already applicable as is? Do we need to have an applicability statement, or is there some easy way to modify it that it would be applicable? All great questions.
Yeah, you've got Brendan.
Yeah, go ahead, Brendan.
So generating a suit report as the first thing essentially implies two pieces of information. The first is that you are booting your device or invoking an image using a suit manifest. If you're not invoking your image using a suit manifest, then it's probably not the right answer. And that would be a good probably argument to look somewhere else. That said, I would hope that if you're not using a suit manifest, that you can get attestation results, because I'm not being able to get this information in attestation results is a bit surprising to me. Now, to the other point about using system property claims, that also seems to be a slightly strange choice to me, because those system property claims they're the direct result of the suit reporting policy. That's exactly the reason that they exist. And so I'm not certain that that is quite what you're looking for. I wonder if maybe just borrowing attestation claims from rats, even if you're not using the attestation results, might be the right answer.
You couldn't see this, but Michael Richardson just had a shrug that everybody in the room saw that you couldn't see. So.
Okay.
Okay. I agree with the first thing that Brennan said. That makes sense about, if you're not using the suit directives to do the load or whatever, then it doesn't make sense to have a suit report to report which directive was an error. So, but why you're not using the suit report to boot is more of an interesting question. So, all right. So I see the queue is empty, so I'm going to go on to the next one, which is very similar, except for this one, unlike hardware, this one is reliably getting to firmware properties. So this one is an updatable component. Okay, but otherwise it's very similar, that you have the same 4 possible answers of attestation results, your reports, TC list, and some new field to get firmware properties. Okay, because often you have a trusted application that depends on a particular version of firmware being installed, either for security purposes or for functionality purposes that it adds some capability that you need. Okay. So the same 4 things exist. Attestation results, what the draft did before, meaning draft 09, the one that's posted right now, is it had 2 things in the EAT profile. It uses software name and software version. During the hackathon, we observed that those strings are defined as being human readable strings, right? They're meant for human display, and therefore they may not be reliable enough for machine processing to say, is this thing up to date or not? I mean, you can certainly do a byte for byte comparison or something like that, but even that could be error prone if, say, you patch something and the human doesn't actually change the version string. Right, so it's not like it's a digest or whatever. So if they don't change it or whatever, then it's not reliable. So we said if it's not really designed for human processing, that's probably not the right claim. And we had Hank at our table, and he suggested the manifest claim, or sorry, Lawrence was at the table, and he suggested the manifest claim was the right one. So we said, hey, that one looks great. So the manifest claim is great for machine processing, although today it's written in a way that we think, and we didn't have like Brennan at the table or whatever, but we thought that that one seemed as defined right now to require the entire manifest rather than a reference to it. And by the way, the details on this one are in the suit working group hackathon report. And so we'll cover that in the meeting later today about that part. So if you have questions on that, make sure you're at the suit working group. Other possibilities are the suit reports for getting the firmware properties. This does have the same constraint that says you can that requires generating suit reports at, say, firmware start time. That could be too burdensome for some TEs, like SGX, which does have firmware, but Draft 09 allowed this too, right? And of course, we didn't remove the stuff that was allowed, right? So you can still do that, but maybe not saying that that's the only way to do it. So the TC list, okay, unlike the hardware properties, right? That didn't apply there because TC list was for things that could be updated, and firmware can be updated. So that one you can do, but only if the Teep agent is healthy, because otherwise you can't trust that list, right? And so if the firmware is out of date, then you can't look at that list to tell whether you need to update the firmware, right? Because you can't trust it. So really the manifest part here inside the attestation results seem to be the best answer out of all those. And so that's what we changed the document to do. So next slide, you'll see the details there. Okay. In the EAT claims, okay, this is the Teep profile for attestation results using EAT in CWT format, okay? So this is the set of claims that are talked about in the EAT profile. So draft 08, this was as of last IETF meeting, right? It looked this way, and we still had one reference to an individual document, okay? Because there was nothing to point to in the EAT spec at that time, okay? Draft 09 references the last EAT document as of the internet draft deadline, where a couple changes were done. There's now HW model claim in draft 09. Well, I'll talk about that in a second here. That actually does put in what we need. Okay, so that means we could get rid of the individual draft reference and reference the working group document. Okay, so that one is a different claim. It's now the one in the document that didn't exist before. And then you can see that's really the only change between 08 and 09. The changes between 09 and the GitHub copy. Okay, well, HW model is the label in the JSON. Okay, which we don't use JSON at CBOR, right? So we fixed that to be the longer version, because the JSON is often an abbreviation for the real, claim name, if you will. And so the claim name we use like the CBOR label, right, which is hardware model. So that one is just a simple, text change in the document, doesn't affect implementations. Okay. Chip version and hardware version. Okay, the EAT document since changed to have hardware version. The chip version was now that label was gone. It still has the same meaning, right? But that changed in the EAT document since since we wrote draft 09. So we just updated that one to retain consistency with the change in the EAT document. And the last one is the actual semantic change, okay, where we changed the software name and version to the manifests one, right? And that's what I covered on the previous slide, right? So the GitHub copy we think is now the correct list, and 09 is now the incorrect, or at least out of date list with the labels. So, okay. Next slide, which is the last one on the same topic. Okay. Inside the EAT profile, okay, it has every EAT profile can specify what's the required claims, prohibited claims, and additional claims or optional claims. Okay. As a reminder, today there are no required claims. Okay, meaning you're allowed to say attestation results are good or bad. You can use the AR4SI and just say you're good, you're not good. And if you're good, that means your Teep agent is healthy and you can trust its it's information messages, it's query results, query response, okay? And if it says no, that means you can't trust anything in the query response. You can do that, okay? That's why required claims is none, okay? If you want to be more detailed, though, there might be some reasons to do that, okay? And so that's why these optional claims are in here. And the text that's in the architecture document that we have consensus on talks about what types of information should be in there. And that's where the list of optional claims comes from, because if you want to be more efficient, okay? So these are for efficiency, not correctness, okay? So the claims in the previous slide, everything on that whole table is for efficiency, okay? And so that as a TAM, you can not update things that don't need to be updated, okay? So the attestation result says you are bad. You have to touch the Teep agent and the secure world operating system and the trusted firmware, or only some subset of those. That's where you can use these informations that we're talking about here, okay? And so this is just to say, and so these are text that was added to actually say that into the spec, okay? That says, if you have these and then attempt to update the Teep agent and all of its dependencies, or only update the specific components that are out of date, okay? So the optional claims let you do the bottom part here. The absence of them forces you into the top one. Okay, so just explaining, that wasn't explained before as to why they were optional, and this actually says what you do in implementing a Teep, what you do in implementing a TAM with that information. So we put this explicit into the TAM behavior section. Okay, next slide. And this, your Torless isn't coming to mind. Okay, go ahead. Okay. Cipher suite negotiation. This was actually one of the large topics that we had, because we were all implementing Cipher suite negotiation at the table. And so we ended up with a whole bunch of things. And so this one is kind of the laundry list of everything that we hit in implementing exactly that same functionality. So first, it wasn't clear whether you must support that this is the agent side, which could be a constrained node. Okay. When implementing COSI, do you have to support both sign and sign one, or just one or the other? Do you get to pick? And the spec was ambiguous. There was two different CDDLs around what Cipher suite equals in the CDDL production, right? What the body of the document said and what the full CDDL section were different. So which one do you implement? It was unclear which Cipher suite combinations were mandatory for the TAM. It was clear which algorithms were mandatory, but the suite is a set of operations. And so that's on the next slide here. Requiring encryption on Mac seemed overly burdensome. For cases that might not need that, especially given you have payload encryption like suit firmware encryption, the document that's in suit. There was a couple cases that Akira pointed out that had incorrect CDDL. We had errors in the CDDL tool. And there was no defined way to specify the order of operations. So let's say you wanted to have two Cipher suites, one that did sign and then encrypt, and one that did encrypt and then sign, or some other sign twice, whatever. There was nothing that said how you specify the order. Right, you could specify the algorithms, but you couldn't specify what order they went in, and if order mattered. Okay, so there was no way to do that, or at least there wasn't a written down way to do that. So those are the list of the problems. Okay, next slide. All right, so here's what we did to fix those things. Okay, first we made Cipher suite a socket, meaning you put the dollar in front of it, which means it's okay for other specs to extend it. Okay, other specs or other implementations, it's an extensible field. So we fixed that part. Just to make it be explicit that that's intended to be extensible. We removed the MAC and encrypt algorithms from the body of the document, given that it's extensible. It says you can define a Teep extension that puts them back in, okay? We're trying to say, how can we scope down the document of the main thing to make it go to RFC faster, just like we did for the suit manifest. We took a bunch of optional stuff and moved it off to different extensions without saying it's bad to do. We just said that's a different document. Did the same thing with MAC and encrypt. We said we're going to move that out of the main document into future extension documents. Okay. Same thing with COSE sign. Okay, we said the simplest form is just sign one. There's only one signature, and so we only talk about sign one in here without precluding the use of sign, because you can do that in extension by adding another Cipher suite that uses sign. We fixed the CDL contradiction by saying the appendix was correct, the body was wrong. And lastly, we specify that the order of operations within a Cipher suite is meaningful. And so you'll see that on the next slide. Okay. Go ahead, next slide. Okay, so there are two mandatory Cipher suites. They happen to use the two mandatory algorithms for the TAM. Okay, so the way that it works on the TAM is that the TAM must implement both Cipher suites, use the two algorithms. The Teep agent gets to pick any one of the mandatory set that it wants. So you have guaranteed interoperability, but the constrained node only needs to do one. So for example, the one that he might have, say, hardware offload for example, okay? But the TAM has to support both so that it works with all of the different Teep agents that might exist, at least right now. So these are two Cipher suites. You can say each Cipher suite is a set of operations. The two mandatory Cipher suites only have a single operation each, but there could be other ones that have multiple, like sign and then encrypt, or encrypt and then sign, or whatever. So this one is just sign, and so in the two mandatory ones, we happen to have cases there's only one entry in the array of operations. Okay, and this is an ordered array of operations that says you sign and then you do nothing else, right? But you can imagine, sign and then encrypt, or encrypt and then sign, or whatever other sequence that you want, and that would be in the Cipher suite, like sign one ES256. The operation itself is one that says use sign one with the following algorithm. Okay, and of course this is not necessarily just two things in there, because Cose sign might have multiple things in there, not just sign one. So all the ones in here right now, the operation only has two values in the internal array, but in general it can be more than two, right? Because sign one means exactly one, right? Or sign means you can have a variable number, right? And so that's where these two came in there. And so we said these two are both mandatory. Implementation detail, EDDSA is not yet in Lawrence's T-Cose implementation, so I couldn't implement the second one yet. But I think I wasn't the only person asking Lawrence for that. So so right now the first one is implemented in a couple of the implementations, but I don't think the second one is yet out of the implementers at the table. So okay. I want to mention the bottom point on there just to reiterate the go back one. The last point was that just as a note, okay, these two do not do encryption. And so that means security considerations, we have to say something about that, especially since we already had text that says anybody defining a Cipher suite, you need to explain why you don't have encryption. So we need to make sure that was in there. So here's what we said, okay? We said we don't do encryption at the Teep layer, okay? But you do encryption at the suit payload layer, and we now reference the suit firmware encryption document in the security considerations section, saying if you want trying to protect the payload, you don't have to encrypt the Teep message, but you better be encrypting the payload, and here's the document that says to do that. Okay.
I'm just thinking of dependencies.
Okay. Yeah, same thing with dependencies, right?
Yeah.
You can encrypt dependencies too. So personalization data is the most obvious case of using firmware encryption, but it's not the only one. Yeah. Okay, so that's what we did for the mandatory Cipher suite section. Okay. 222, we're still in the Cipher suite section of stuff. A bunch of these are related. So this one said supported Cipher suites was previously an optional field. You can see in the red blob there, it was previously in there, which meant that it could be absent. And so the TAM could send a message that did not include which Cipher suites it supported. Now what the text used to say is if it's not there, it means that it supports the two on the previous slide. Okay, that's what it previously said. But that means that on the Teep agent, the constrained node, you had to have code to deal with both cases. Okay, and you had to hard code the fact that the absence meant those two things. You said, well, what happens, 5, 6 years from now, where there's a weakness in one of those? Let's say ES256 has a weakness, and we need to move it to what, ES384 or something like that. Okay, and that means that you still have to have code in the constrained devices that have the old obsolete thing. Okay. And so how do we make it be more robust to the future? And Ken was the one that pointed out that, 5, 6 years from now, you might have other ones that become mandatory by then too, right? And so at some point in the future, you're going to have to deal with the case where there really is no useful default, right? So let's just make it be mandatory now. And all the implementers said, yeah, sure, let's just go ahead and make it be mandatory now, because this one is a breaking change. Okay, so we went around the table saying, anybody got a problem with this? Anybody got a problem with this? Nobody had a problem with it. Everybody said, let's do it. So we did it as the implementers. We said, okay, because the only people that are going to object to breaking changes are the implementers, and we had 5, 6 of them at the table. So, so this one, we made a breaking change. This one is a major breaking change, but we did it. And this makes it be mandatory, and we think it actually simplifies the code in the Teep agent and makes it be more future-proof. So, okay, next. So we updated that, and here's the example in the appendix with the examples. And so you can say, here's a particular message of supported Cipher suites, and you can see it looks like this when it comes across the wire, at least in the diagnostic form. And you can see the 18 minus 7 and 18 minus 8 is what the TAM fills in, because that's the two cipher suites that we have on the previous slide. Sign 1 with ES256 and sign 1 using EDGSA is what the TAM should be including in all of its message. This is mandatory currently. So it means that your query request gets a couple bytes longer and your agent implementation gets a little simpler. Okay. Next. So there's a question about, so which Teep messages are protected with which cipher suite? So here's what the text says in the Internet Draft posted version. After a query response is received, the selected cipher suite is used in subsequent Teep messages, install success and error. That means you can't protect this query response. That's what that text said. We said, that's probably not right, okay? Because by the time you're sending the query response, you've already finished negotiating the cipher suite. So shouldn't you be able to protect the query response too? Okay. And it's also ambiguous. It says, does that mean that you have to use the same cipher suite in both directions, right? Is selected means selected that what the Teep agent does for its operations when composing always has to be the same as what the TAM agent is doing. So if it's doing sign but not encrypt, does that mean the other side has to sign but not encrypt? Okay. And so right now we said the answer is we couldn't think of a case for in the short term where saying it was bidirectional was a problem. That was kind of already implied, but it wasn't explicitly stated. So we said the least change was to just explicitly state the fact that, yes, it's bidirectional. And if you needed to do different than that, then leave that to a Teep extension document. Don't try to address it in the main document because we think it is extensible in extension document. I see a nod from the back. Okay, good. Thank you for the positive feedback. All right, next slide. Same issue. Second related question, I just mentioned about the query response. Okay, so the query response, it could be protected because you're going to send back in there which cipher suite you selected. Okay, now this is a question that I need somebody that is more of a COSE, et cetera, expert than I am. The selected cipher suite is inside the Teep message. The Teep message is meaning it's inside the COSE blob. Okay, which means you can't get to the selected part without having to parse the COSE blob to begin with. So is COSE blob, is it self-describing that you know which cipher suite it was at the time you're decoding the cipher without the blob without having to look inside it? I'm hoping the answer is yes. Can somebody tell me if that's the case? I'm seeing Hannes nodding. Okay, good, good. Okay, good. So that was the question here. Can a receiver figure it out from a COSE object and parse correctly? As long as the answer is yes, then there's no problem with what we did. Can the attestation payload be encrypted? Can suit reports be encrypted? Are all questions that arise when addressing this question. I think the answer is today, can EAT be encrypted by using the EAT spec? I think the answer is yes, but we're not sure. Hank? No, the answer is no. Okay. Can suit reports be encrypted by using the suit report document? Brendan? Somebody know without looking. These are questions that came up afterwards, so that's why I didn't know the answers because we didn't talk about these three during the.
I mean, it doesn't say no,
okay.
but there's no explicit mechanism enabling that yet. I
Yeah,
think it
so
says that they're supposed to be authenticated because that's kind of important. But I don't think there's anything that says anything about encryption so far.
Okay. So I guess the Teep feedback would be, it might be nice for the suit reports document to say something. And this gets back to the question of if you cannot via the spec, then it means the Teep cipher suite might need to do encryption, assuming that there's sensitive data in the suit reports, right? I can easily imagine that there is sensitive data in a suit report. Okay, and if that's the case, just give your considerations, then it should be encrypted somewhere, either by the transport or by the suit report itself.
I'm just curious as to what the key exchange mechanism would look like in that scenario. That seems like a really challenging environment for a key exchange.
I agree. I don't know the answer. That's why it came up as a question. So, so what we're saying in Teep right now is that Teep does not solve the transport layer without an extension, and it leaves it up to the payload. And it could just be, don't put sensitive information in the suit report if you're not going to encrypt it. Right? Just put non-sensitive information in there.
So
which directive failed might not be sensitive information, right? So
at that level, you should have a public key for the recipient, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it should be doable.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Again, those were questions that I think are more, I hope are more questions for the suit reports document and not for the Teep protocol document, but happy to be wrong. So, all right. Last question. Does it mean that an error sent in response to a query request cannot be protected? Okay, because if you had a query request that was malformed, and I'm saying, for example, it was saying a set of supported Cipher suites that did not include one that the Teep agent supports. Okay, which technically that should never happen with a compliant TAM, but you got to be robust to non-compliant TAMs or maybe future TAMs that with a current agent, right? A future one that changes the set of which ones are more secure or whatever. So could you send an error message in response to that? And the answer is yes. Right now we did that, but could you protect it with anything? Okay. And in some cases, the suite reports could be considered sensitive. So here's an example of what we might say. This one I don't think is in the GitHub copy right now. It says, here's an example of what I thought we might say. If the Teep agent was able to select a Cipher suite from among the Tams supported Cipher suites, and that wasn't the problem in the query response, right? Then use that to protect the error message, right? Because you can get to a key then, right? You can get to a set of operations, the other guy can't. You're going to complain about something else, like wrong version, right? Would be an example, right? Say here's the requested version, and I don't support that version, or any of the other things, unsupported extension, that type of thing. Okay, so if you can, go ahead and protect that. Otherwise, protect the error with a mandatory Cipher suite that the Teep agent supports. Okay. And if the TAM can support it, great. If not, well, you weren't going to get communication anyway. So, but specifically, don't include sensitive information with a Cipher suite that doesn't encrypt. Okay. So my proposal is we put those 3 sentences in there and call that good enough. I see a nod from Russ, and Akira is getting a cue.
Okay, I'll forgive you. You're supposed to get on the queue, but that's okay.
Oh, sorry.
No. Go ahead.
Yeah. We also talked about this during the hackathon, and probably talked in Japanese. There was one more choice we had. It was not responding to any error message.
Yeah.
Then because the error message with anything could be used for the attacker to sense the implementation, how to go work around.
Yeah, there's a complicated issue there that actually overlaps the meeting I just came out of, which was, right before this, was the EDM program of the IAB, which is the contentious document about the robustness principle considered harmful. And this was actually one of the topics. So yeah, so there are considerations there, meaning there are arguments to do both. My personal opinion is you should send an error message when you can, and I can tell you the authors of that document have reasons why that is, but it may not be 100% applicable to your point. So, so maybe there's another sentence we should add to clarify or whatever, but in most cases, sending the error actually helps to tell the other side the fact that it's doing something wrong, because otherwise it will keep doing the wrong thing if you don't tell them. At least that's part of the argument. So.
That one is hard.
Yeah. Okay. So, this is the slide deck that doesn't have the last slide in it. So I'm going to do that verbally, which is the
Here we
one
go.
that Ken posted.
There we go. I can push the button finally.
Go ahead.
Michael Richardson. So just about the last point, I think we have enough bad experiences from Ike v1, for instance, where, the error about not being able to select the Cipher suites was was never transmitted, and you never could fix problems.
Mhm.
And you know what? Telling the attacker the list of Cipher suites that you might support is just not that big a deal. They can enumerate them, and we were really anal about that at the time, and it did not contribute to interoperability or debuggability. So if that's the reason for not sending an error, don't do that, please. Yeah.
So it sounds like you don't have an issue with the bullets that are on here right now.
I don't have an issue
Okay.
with there. Yeah, I don't have an issue. And if
Okay,
someone
okay.
thinks, what I'm saying is I think we should be really clear about that and not accept any, I don't disclose my policy because it's a security problem, because I think that just leads to people turning all the shit off.
I can try and reload.
Yeah, if you want to try to
I-
reload, because I added one more slide. So the other day, Ken posted a message to the suit list that I then responded to and added the Teep list onto there because it's a cross Teep suit issue that we both ran into in our implementations, but we didn't explicitly discuss. I think we came up with the hackathon, but then we kind of forgot about it until afterwards, until this message came up there. So Let's see if it's in here. So it should be the last slide.
I'm trying.
Yep. And it has to do with how do you delete a component? Okay,
So it's in the meeting materials.
Yeah.
But it's not in the folder.
Interesting.
Very interesting. So I don't know how to.
There's a refresh cycle tool circle at the top. Little gear, right, and then pull down to manage slide.
Up at the right.
I have it on my laptop, but I would rather let
Just
somebody else deal with
please.
it. So then we can get it up here.
I see countdown clock, gallery view.
If you'd like to be AV tech support. Yeah.
Yeah, Russ. Notification.
Step out of the box here so Russ can come up here.
On the top right, I see nothing. I see, oh. Middle.
Okay. So I'll start introducing it to distract from
Yeah, but there's-
the man behind the curtain over there.
Yeah, that's not top right.
The question
This
that
is
came up,
middle.
and sorry for those that are remote, I'm not on mic right now, or not on camera right now. You can watch the tech crew over there and just listen. The question comes up when you have a
no,
number of
it's
different
there.
Teep
It's just
agents
peeking.
that are being managed by the same TAM. Okay. And let's say one of them no longer needs a particular trusted component. I can come back now. Awesome. Okay. Out of the Teep agents that a TAM is managing, some of them want to keep using a trusted component, and some of them don't need it anymore. Okay. And so this situation results.
It's still not there.
Still not there. All right.
I
But
did
it's in
do
the
a
slides that I
refresh.
sent. So.
So it is in the meeting materials.
It is? Okay.
Yes.
All right. I'll just talk to it if I can remember it, and somebody else can call it up and tell me if I'm missing a point. Okay. So, all right, back up, repeat. All right. So you have a bunch of different Teep agents. Some of them need a trusted component. Some of them no longer need it. It's one of the optional ones. It says the Teep agents can have it. In this example, the Teep agents can have it when they have something that depends on it, right? And it may vary, right? So whether, think of it as phones, and sometimes the user has an app installed and sometimes it doesn't. All the phones are authorized to if they want it, right? So TAM is perfectly fine as long as the Teep agent would want it, that it could have it. Okay. So this means it says, okay, one of those devices says, I don't need it anymore. The user uninstalled it. Okay, so here's this just the example. Okay, so now I need to delete that component from there, but I don't want to delete from all the other ones. Okay. So what we have in the Teep protocol right now, the other Teep agents. You got a bunch of different devices. One of them doesn't want it anymore, so I want to delete it on that one, but I don't want to force it to be deleted on all the other Teep agents. All the other devices are still going to use that component. Okay. Okay. And so what the TAM has is he has a set of Teep manifests, of suit manifests, or perhaps references to suit manifests stored in other repositories. Okay. And so what we did in a previous version of the Teep protocol is we removed like a delete message, and we said we're just going to use the update message to do all types of updates. Okay. The update message today allows you to specify a list of suit manifests. We showed that on a previous slide here. Okay. That means to do a deletion, you got to pass down a suit manifest that has the delete directives in it. Okay. So if you're following the logic here, that means that if I have some that need to be deleted, some Teep agents that need a deletion and some that don't, I have to have a version of a suit manifest today that I can use to send to just that one that's different from the suit manifest that I'm sending to the other one. Okay. That means I have to either construct one or get one from the author, depending on who the signer of the suit manifest is. Okay. So I either have to construct one where like I'm the signer and I re-sign it or whatever. And so there's extra burden here. Okay. It says, well, what manifest sequence number do I put in the deletion manifest? Okay. Right, but what's 1+? Because the manifest that I send to you and to Hannes would be different ones. They both have the same sequence number, right? Not that you know that, that's fine, right? But that means I gotta have two different versions, and who's incrementing that? And is it the TAM, or is it the manifest author, or is the TAM a new manifest author that wraps the original one, or whatever? So that's the kind of the questions that come up. Okay. Second problem with that thing is to say, what happens if there's a component that's on there?
There's your slide.
Thank you. Yes, thank you.
I
Woo.
just did it manually.
You went. Okay. Yeah, so here's the manifest list that exists right now. Okay. In the update message. Okay. And I've just been talking about what if the TAM has a manifest from a third party? Do you like encapsulate it and re-sign it as a new signer or whatever? What if the device has a component that the TAM doesn't know about? Right? The query response said, I have this other suit manifest thing. Here's my component ID. The TAM says, I've never seen that before. How do you delete that if you've never seen it before? It's not really specified in suit, right? So you said, well, we can do this with suit maybe if you come up with a way to do it, but is that the right mechanism? Okay. So what if a device has a component that just showed up there? It was installed by, SneakerNet or something. Maybe it had a suit manifest that the Teep agent has, but the TAM didn't know about it before. He's never heard of it before until you sent the component ID and digest and stuff. And the TAM says, I don't know where this thing came from. Please delete it. You're not authorized to have this, right? So you got to have a way to delete that. And so Ken proposed, let's have, when we install with a suit manifest, right, whether it comes to the TAM or not, okay, what if, because you have installed directives that says, here's the suit manifest, and here's the steps to install or to boot or whatever, right? Ken's proposal is, well, let's also add when installing whatever, and by the way, for future reference, here's the uninstall, here's the opposites, here's how to clean the stuff up, okay? And so that gets packaged in the original install one. So I don't have to bump the version number, all the uninstalled directives are in the original one. So however you got the original one, you have the uninstalled directives around. And by the way, most software packages that you install today on platforms already have the uninstall mechanism in the installer package, right? So it's kind of consistent with that mechanism. That's kind of where the idea comes from. Okay. So this idea that says, what if the suit manifest had uninstalled directives? So you don't bump the version number if you just want to say, delete that thing I've never heard of. You said, that thing you told me about? Follow the uninstalled directives, please. Okay, so that's actually the proposal here, which is if suit puts in the uninstalled directives, as Ken proposed, then we could go back to this update message, right, which right now is a manifest list, and we could put back in here a way to say just delete by ID, right? Here's the ID. I'm not going to give you the full suit manifest because I may not have it, right? You have it, or you would have told me about it. Just follow the uninstall procedures you already have. Okay. So that's kind of the summary of this thread that Ken and I were starting on the list here. And we wanted feedback from the working groups on this because we're not going to have time in suit to talk about this because we're already at the hour or whatever. So this is the only time we have if you have comments.
Well, you've got two people on the queue. Brendan?
Yep.
Modeled this yet?
Sorry.
Have you threat modeled this yet?
Oh.
No, it's a message on a list as of 2 days ago. So
yeah, so I'd
help.
be really interested in exactly what the threat model is here, because it sounds to me like you're introducing an unauthenticated command to remove a component.
No. The TAM is authoritative for what software or what trusted components are running in the Teep agent's TEE. That's the definition of the TAM. It's the trusted application manager of that device.
Now, here's the second question. What exactly do you... Okay, I'll come back. Sorry. No, I need to finish that thread. Right. So how many TAMs can one device have? And how do you divide up their areas? What happens when there is a mutual dependency between two TAMs? How do you make sure that one doesn't forcibly uninstall something that the other is depending on?
Yep. The answer to that is if we go all the way back to the OTRP document, it used the term trust domain, which came out of global platform world, meaning the meaning that global platform defines for trust domain, and that there's one TAM per trust domain. And that's why Ken's proposal is to talk about this in suit's trust domains document, because the assumption that there is one TAM per trust domain unless a TAM explicitly delegates another one, like personalization data or something like that. So there are cases on a particular suit manifest, there exists only one thing that would be the controller of it.
So that means that dependencies across trust domains are forbidden.
Yes. Well, I don't know about dependencies. I would say on non-explicit dependencies across trust domains.
No. I'm talking about explicit dependencies across trust domains, because then the second TAM has the ability to break the dependencies of the first TAM.
I understand what you're saying, and I think that you can do that. And so, yes, if you're delegating to say TAM1 has a dependency on something for which TAM2 is authoritative, and you consider that to be acceptable when defining TAM1's, the manifest that he's pushing out, then TAM1 is saying, yes, I'm agreeing that TAM2 can always yank one of my dependencies and kind of override my ability to work, right? Yes, that's possible.
Okay, left pad, here we come. All right.
Yeah, go ahead.
then the other point is what exactly lives in those uninstall instructions, because that is really unclear to me. Is it just a list of components that you don't need? Like, what is it?
I think, I don't know, Candace isn't coming up to the mic, so I'll attempt to channel what I think that we would say is the install directives are an explicit set of steps that you follow in order to do the install, right? You copy this component into this, disk space or whatever it is, and it should, in lowercase should, be the exact opposite of those. Now you're pointing out what happens if it's not, and that is dangerous, right? And I get your point, Brendan.
So I would really like, speaking as a suit author, I would very much appreciate a few examples from the Teep list of exactly what would go in an uninstall directives sequence. Because unless we have that, I'm really not sure what we can do.
The obvious ones that I can think of is because if I look at uninstall equivalent of directives in other formats, not Teep, but like MSIs on or INF files on Windows and similar things in APT or PIB or whatever. It's like delete the following component from the following directory or repository for some definition. So like in Windows, you have a registry, or on a file system, you have a file system directory for holding libraries or includes or execute, your bin directory or whatever. Your install directives say copy this thing into the bin directory, and the delete says delete, or the uninstall says delete it from the bin directory. The same thing, but it better be the same thing, or you've got a security problem. So, but yes, deleting things from specific repositories, whether those are disk space or some other database that's resident on the system.
So in suit parlance, could that simply be a list of indices of component IDs? Do we need commands at all?
You probably know better than I do, so maybe.
Okay. I think any further should probably go to the list. I think I've got a good overview. Thank you.
Yeah, but that was why we started this thread on the list. Thank you, Ken, for kicking off this thread, because it really is a cross-Teep suit discussion, although my belief is a lot of the answers in suit, and the Teep has to follow whatever suit directs, but suit only has an hour, and this can't be on the agenda because we've got a full hour or so.
Well, but you can have it in the mail list.
Correct, right. So a lot.
So-
We want to kick it off here and then defer to mailing. That's correct.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. Michael.
Michael Richardson. So I had two things. I have two things to say now after listening to Brendan. The one that I almost forgot was, why do we wind up in the case where we have something that the TAM doesn't know about? And actually, I think a very reasonable situation is there is a problem and with the components, and the user has been given a adequately signed debug version that the TAM is willing to accept, but you don't normally give this out. It runs for a while, and then later on, when the bug is actually found and fixed and things need to be upgraded, then some component now gets deleted. That was the debug version of it, and that's why the TAM doesn't know about it, because it arrived through other means. And I think that's a really good thing, because it means that we can both debug, but then remove the user from the debug situation later on. So I think that's really good.
Yep,
Okay.
I agree.
As for the other concern about trust, about different domains and whatever, the only reason why domain A with TAM A would ever be sharing any component with domain B with TAM B is because you are seriously limited on space. Okay. That's, to me, the only reason. Do you have another reason? They're not delegating to each other. They don't know about each other, first of all.
There's an example that's in the architecture spec.
Okay.
And the example is the code comes from one TAM, and the personalization data comes from another TAM.
Fair enough.
That's the example that's in there.
Okay. And so, in fact, the personalization data could be used by multiple entities.
And it's because the TAM with the personalization data does not trust the first TAM with the actual personalization data, right? So you might have
fair enough. It doesn't change my subsequent comments, which were essentially that, well, if the reason was disk space, but you've just given me a different reason, okay, then reference counted hard links are 50-year-old technology, okay, and that's to me, just one of them unlinks it and the other one says, well, I still have a copy because underlying, I still have it. Okay. I just don't think that's fundamentally an argument against this. Okay.
I think that is a great point, and I think that's exactly why Brennan used the term unlink in the suit manifest document, is for similar reasons. So I think that's a great answer to your question, Brennan, is that's what unlink is, and you can't make it go to 0. You can just drop it by 1. Okay. I don't know how we're doing on time, but I told you I was going to take all my other time back. So
And you did.
okay.
You did.
All right. I think Penguin then?
Yes. So Penguin, see if I can. Oh, that's rude. All the slots are taken? What? I'm trying to unshare and reshare. There we go. I'm living on the edge. I keep getting these network errors. Ha 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 ha.
Okay.
All right.
So, okay. So sorry, I have to join this meeting remotely. So is my audio and video clear?
Yes.
Okay. So this is the draft about the Teep use case. Oh, sorry, I lost the. Oh, here it is. Here is the Teep use case for computational computing in network, and I also shared this draft in the computational computing consortium. So next slide, please. Here's the motivation, and we all know that the computational computing is the protection of data in use by hardware-based trust execution environment. But when using this computational computing in network or in a remote environment, so I think there are some issues that need to be clarified. So first is that what is the architecture or what is the instance of computational computing in a network? And the second one is that what kind of, oh, sorry, I lost the
Yeah,
slide.
I'm trying to reshare because Soren mentioned that the slides are not being shared. So for those that are remote, can you see the slides now? Claims that I'm sharing them.
Yeah, I can see it.
Okay.
I can see them. Looks good here.
Okay, okay.
Thank you.
So the second question is what kind of application package a network user should use? Would it be a trust application and personalization data are bundled together or not? The third question is what kind of steps a network user should follow to deploy application packages. I think that the Teep architecture has defined lots of components like the Teep agent, the Teep broker, and etc. But I think these questions, especially from the perspective of a user or network user, I think we need to clarify this. So this draft try to use this Teep architecture and protocol to illustrate this computational computing in network. And this includes the notional architecture, the relevant package type of application, and the deploy steps. So next slide, please. Okay, here's the I think in general, there are 3 kinds of computational computing instance that could exist in the network. The first one is a trusted process, which could be in a virtual machine or could be in an operating system. And the second one is the trusted VM, which is based on a hypervisor, and the process and the containers in this trusted virtual machine are also confidential. And third one is the container. So the container could be in a container engine or could be in a virtual machine. And this container is also protected by the TE. So in general, these are 3 instances that the network user could use when they want to say that I want a TE and which kind of TE is it? So it may be a process, a virtual machine, or a container. So next slide, please. Now here's the notional architecture of this draft. So we added two components. First one is the network MOC, which is Network Management and Orchestration Center. And the Trusted Application Manager is in that network MOC. And the second is the data owner or the network user. And the network user who also owns the personalization data and the trust application and also the untrusted application. So there are also some common components like the trust application, untrust application, and Teep broker, Teep agent. This has been defined in the Teep architecture. So next slide, please. Here is the application package and the deploy steps. So I think there are two principles to deploy packages in the confidential computing environment. The first one is that the personalization data can only be processed by Tams after remote attestation. And principle two is that the personalized data must be transferred securely. And I mean security is that this package could be encrypted or during some secure channel like a remote attestation TLS or just the way we talked before, the course format or some other formats. So the table shows is one example, one case one. In this case, the UA, TA, and PA and PD are bundled as one package. And in the second column shows that the process in a physical or virtual machine. This could be supported by the trust zone or SGX. And in this scenario, the steps should follow in the table. First of all, the network will attest the Teep agent to see if the Teep agent is trusted. So after verification and the network user will transfer this package to the Teep agent, and then Teep agent will decrypt or unpack this package, and then the trust application will be loaded to the trusted process. And then the personalization data will be loaded to the trusted application. And in the end, the untrusted application will be loaded to the read. So this is a basic principle of the logic I think we should follow. And the third column shows the steps in the container in a physical or virtual machine. And the last column shows the step of how to deploy in a virtual machine. Next slide, please. There are some other different packages, like this package mode is the UATA one package, and the personalization data is one package, or the UATA and PD are separate packages. And in this scenario, the UA should be deployed to the read first, and then the TA is loaded to the trust process or trust container or trust VM. Then the network user will attest the Teep agent. After verification, the network user will trust the TE, then it will transfer its personalization data to the trust application in the process or container or virtual machine. And the lower table shows that, some format mistake, I think. In this scenario, I think it is that the TA and PD are one package and the UA is another package. And so the steps should be the UA first load to the read, and then there's a network remote attestation, and then the T and PD will be loaded to the trust process or container or virtual machine. So next slide, please. This table, there are also different cases. This one is upper one is that TA and PD are separate packages, and the lower one is that the TA and PD are the same package. So they also have steps to deploy this package, and they may be a little bit different. So yeah, these are also cases I think involved. Next slide, please. Now here is one interesting scenario that is not inside the draft, but I think it is very interesting to share with you guys. And in this scenario, that with this use case and the Teep and computer computing could be introduced to different scenarios like oblivious transfer, which belongs to the private computing. And the original oblivious transfer is that the collector, which I think is the network user, could query certain information from the data center and the data center cannot know the specific query information. And in order to do that, the OT algorithm will create lots of redundant query result to puzzle the data center. And this will cause lots of network overhead to transfer this redundant data result to the collector. For example, if the data center has 1 gigabyte of information and the collector only want to query 10 bytes of information, so the OT algorithm will have to create more than 1 gigabyte of redundant information and transfer to the collector. Then the collector will decrypt all these information until it gets the correct query information result. So when we use computational computing and combine with the OT algorithm, I think things will be more easy. First, we deploy the OT algorithm, which is also the trust application, to the data center. And then we'll transfer the personalization data, which is also the query information, to that OT algorithm. Then the result is that it could replace the network overhead by memory access, and only transfer the correct query result to collector, because that the computational computing could protect the information inside its environment. So the OT algorithm could process all the information and until it gets the correct query information, just transfer the 10 bytes of information to the collector. So this is just one very interesting scenario. Next slide, please. I think that's it. Here's the summary. This use case is trying to use Teep architecture and protocol to illustrate how to use computational computing in the network and list out the relevant steps and the package mode. And I think this could get the network user, remote user, to use this technology. And then there are some issues that remain open or not in this draft scope, I think. For example, how to process remote attestation and how to create a secure channel. I think there has been lots of discussion in these issues. So I'm not sure if this is in the draft. I think they may be covered by other groups like the REST group. Or the how to create a remote attestation. I think it's based on the hardware architecture, like use the quote enclave or secure processor. In the end, we would like that this draft to be adopted as a working group draft. I think that would be very appreciated. Oh, I have Hannes on the queue.
Yeah, so Hannes?
Yeah, I think the work that Pingling is doing is quite important because in the way we described the terminology and the architecture, of course, predates sort of all the excitement on confidential computing, but it still has the ingredients in there, like what we refer to as personalization data is often for some people working in a confidential computing space difficult to associate with some of their confidential workloads because the names are so different and some of the others. So I personally see that there's a possibility for us to sort of describe on how to map some of the confidential computing use cases, and there are different sort of models, as Pingling was just talking about, to the Teep architecture. And I think explaining that and potentially motivating with some examples on how you do that, what that means, like with applying the Teep protocol and its subcomponents. I think that could be quite helpful for readers who stumble over the work or want to come up with a standardized way in supporting some of the confidential computing use cases.
Okay,
Thanks,
thank you.
Dave?
Dave Thamer. So I think there's two things that are in Penguin's presentation and draft that I hadn't seen in any other draft or presentation, and that I think are valuable contributions to the Teep discussion. One of them was in the use case form of where is the Teep, the device of the Teep agent, right? Because the cases that we've talked about in architecture and other drafts and things where the Teep agent's in some device, like an IoT device or something like that, or a phone or a laptop or whatever, and the case where it's in the cloud. Okay, this is a use case where it's neither of those. Okay, It's some middle box in the network, such as, the network operators, router or switch or something like that. And so it's like a cloud, except for it's actually in the local network. Okay. So it's just a variation of like a local cloud, whatever. And it's just another use case that says you can use the same technology that you do with the cloud. You can do that with a device here. Okay. And so that part is just an interesting, this too. Okay. But the other thing that this talked about that applies to the cloud as well, that we didn't explicitly cover, was in the architecture document where we talk about the bundling, where we have like the untrusted app, the trusted app, and the personalization data. And that's where you cover all those like different cases and stuff, right? In the cloud, and in this case, right, there doesn't have to be an untrusted app. Okay, if you think about the trend towards, confidential VMs and confidential containers and so on, there's only a trusted app. There's no untrusted app on the whole device, right? And so that's something that I think does come up and was talked about in Penguin's draft that wasn't mentioned in any other thing. Was, the absence of an untrusted application is also an interesting contribution to the discussion. So thanks, Penguin, for bringing up both of those cases, because I think they're both worth making sure that we're thinking about when we're doing drafts and implementations and stuff, is to say, what if there is no untrusted app? It's just a trusted app running inside of a TEE, and the only thing that's using it is something across the network, right? And you have some network path or whatever that's provided by the TEE that's not the untrusted app per se, is not involved. So there is no such thing. So I think that part is a useful contribution. And when talking about things without a user interface, right? It's not just the cloud as we classically think about it with cloud confidential computing with like, Azure and AWS and GCP and so on. It's also things like network operators is an interesting use case we want to consider too. I don't know that it has any changes to the protocol, okay? But I think it's an interesting use case. In particular, the lack of a UA, I think, is a good contribution. So thanks.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you, Dave.
Yeah, so Daniel, we go at the mic.
Hi.
I'd like also to support if we have a document that illustrates somehow some of the discussions we're having in this working group. I think that's going to be helpful for people watching at us.
Okay.
One thing I have the impression we should not try to be to provide a complete description of everything that can be done. So if we can target that just as an open illustrative discussion, I think it's reasonable, but we don't want to end up with a book at the end.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we tried to do in the architecture, or the authors of the architecture as well, right? So what I'm hearing is that this is a useful addition for another model, right? I guess the question that I have is, I see that as a standards track document, although I don't see it making any changes. So my question as a chair is, does it need, I see it more as an informational as opposed to standards, right? So as a chair, that would be my recommendation. Dave, you're back in the queue?
Yeah, Dave, you work.
Yes. I'm trying to think. What I think might be useful, and I'll think on the fly about to answer your question. Informational, not standards track, to answer that question, because this is about use cases.
Correct.
I'm thinking that it may be useful if we can combine both the cloud case and the network case into a single use case document that covers both, because I think this notion that says there are use cases that don't have an untrusted application, and here's two of them that are very similar. There's different types of operators, but the technology-wise, right, they're almost identical, other than, the things that go around Teep, right? But a lot of the same considerations. I think it might be useful to have a working group document that's informational use case that covers both cloud and network, which are cases that don't have a UA.
Okay,
I didn't
now
say that's the common thread.
I'm
so.
confused. I thought this draft covered both, but then I've been skimming
This
through a lot of
draft that
drafts.
Penguin is presenting is called for
Confidential?
the network.
Yes.
And for that, he's talking about cloud is already covered there. We're talking about in your local network or whatever. And I'm saying if you broaden
want
it to
include
say,
it. Yeah.
and cloud too, and say, take Penguin's document, add the cloud stuff into it too, then I think it's actually even more applicable, because
Include which
we don't have a
document?
document that says you can have cloud confidential computing cases without a UA, just like you can have network confidential computing cases without a UA. It would be useful to put that in one document and not try to say we don't need a whole bunch of documents, right? Combine them into one document that says use cases without a UA, and Penglin's case and the cloud cases have a lot of the same text that you'd want, and so just put it in the common section. So that's what I would say is
Okay.
if that is done, then I think it would probably be useful to have another informational use case document. Whether it's done as a working group document or not, I don't care either way. I think it does make sense. So
Okay. So do you want to wait until that inclusion is made, or do you want to adopt this? I'm trying to figure out how to.
well, I see
structure
Daniel
the
in
poll.
queue, and I want to know if he would change my opinion. So
Yeah.
no, I don't know.
So in my case, I don't really have a strong opinion, but
Okay.
I had in mind more something informational.
Yes.
Informational, but I mean, I'm not strong. I
So,
might change my mind somewhere.
well, so Pengling as a chair, my recommendation is, given what we just discussed, is that it's not a standards track document. It would be an informational document. So if we were to adopt it and it moves forward with adoption, I would have you change it from standards track to informational.
Okay. My first thought is informational, but somehow the draft is standard.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay,
So
Dave, you're back in the queue.
Well, yeah, technically I'm not out of the queue, but
Oh, yeah.
all I was going to say is I'm looking at our AD and stuff, but I think it's within the realm of the working group to decide how many documents a milestone gets split into. And if you consider this to be like a separate thing that we didn't cover in the architecture document because it's not core, it's like an addendum, and we could use that without having any charter updates. As long as the AD agrees with that, then I don't see any issues with saying, yeah, we could have another milestone or something like that. I just want to confirm that there's no charter issue here. I don't think there is, and I see you nodding. So, okay, good.
Okay.
Oh, thank you.
I didn't think so. That was going to be my last question to our AD, whom I can't see because of the cameras, but yes, I'm too short. So, Soren, you're in the queue.
What I would like to help here is that, in my opinion, there are two interesting use cases that I hope they are included in this targeted. That one, the first one is the fact that when you use containers, it could be a problem for the container security, and that's why I think that it should be a different use case. Or the normal use case, I'm looking to the clouds mostly, right? That's the current direction for my thinking. So I'm worried about the security issues of that a little bit. So can you hear me?
Yes, I
Yes,
can
we
hear
can
you.
hear you.
Because I think I lost it for a second. Okay, so that will be I think I would like to show the two cases being one cloud proper and one containers in the cloud. That's my plan. So, and I will be very interested to join the draft.
Okay, thank you.
Chris.
Hi. So I'm reacting to Soren, and I'm kind of curious about what he means by kind of container security and the complications. And so, I mean, I understand a little bit, and I'll give you a little bit of background in that. You know, at Carnegie Mellon University, we have some research project going on that's actually rewriting kind of the C groups of Linux with formal analysis tied into secure hardware, you know, root of trust, with a hypervisor that's already written in formal language. So it would have formal proofs of correctness from the, you know, secure execution element up through the virtualization stuff. So I'd be very interested in understanding what your kind of definition of what those risks are.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay,
What
but
I
in
want
the
to. Sorry.
So from a working group point of view, if this is in scope as well, you know, if you want any input on that.
Right. So in the interest of time, we've got 2 minutes left. What I'm trying to assess is readiness of adoption for this particular document versus waiting to get inclusion. At least, Dave, you made it clear of the applicability of the network use case and the pure cloud use case. And so I was trying to craft a poll. It really sucks to do everything parallel. So I was trying to craft a poll to see if there was interest in waiting for the inclusion of both, or, so let me just start the session. And I may not have worded it perfectly, but let me just move it forward as a poll. And it's basically, I'm asking the question, do you want both use cases included before we adopt the document? Or can I ask the question to just adopt this document as a seed and we elaborate moving forward? So the first question is, do you want to wait for everything? So let's go ahead, and I'm going to give it a few more seconds because we're going to be running out of time pretty soon. So I will need help from the AD, and it's not overwhelming consensus. So I could help with guidance here. Hannes, well, I'd like to get the AD to.
Follow the city. So I don't think there's a big difference in between doing it before or after the adoption call.
Okay.
If you plan on doing it anyway, you'll get some discussion anyway if it doesn't happen.
Okay.
So either is fine with me.
Okay.
And that's pretty much what I
What you were going to say.
interpreted the result as well for
Okay.
that reason.
Yeah, I mean, there's the consensus is leaning towards let's just do the call. So let me start the poll. Reopen. Okay. Please hang on, network. You can do this. I usually ask a set of questions. You support adoption of and Peng, help me in real time, the name of your draft again? Use cases?
For confidential computing in network. Yeah, I think Dave's idea is better. We can adopt it first and then add it to the container use case in that.
Okay,
in
I
that
have
draft.
started the poll to support adoption for the draft that Peng just presented, since we're out of time, and then we'll confirm it on the mail list. So, okay, so we pretty much have unanimous consent here, which is good. We have strong support. So, Ping Ling, what I'm going to ask you to do is change it, and I can, if I forget, just remind me. Change the draft to informational and make it a
Okay.
formal Teep draft, and then you can submit it. Okay?
Okay. Okay.
So with that, see, this is why I always leave a few minutes buffer, because we're 2 minutes over. With that, thank you to the authors and presenters, Ping Ling. We're making good progress. I didn't get to ask the question, so I'll ask it on the list, whether we can do an early review for the protocol draft and readiness for working group last call. So I'll do that on the mail list. Dave?
Right now, my plan is to go ahead and post the GitHub copy and then keep working on the issues, just because that gets a whole bunch of them out of the way. And now we're down to like the 3 that we've been talking about recently, and not have to wait for those other 3, just so we get an update so that any
It's a
implementers are
question of
using.
whether you wanted to put another rev before I do the question of readiness for working group last call.
We know that there's 3 open issues, and so that's up to you, I guess. So, meaning there's 3 issues we discussed that don't have GitHub pull requests already merged, right? So, all but 3 of them, meaning Ken's, which doesn't have a number, and I think the 2 other ones that we discussed. The last 3 slides or the last 3 topics are ones that don't already have text merged into the GitHub copy. I'll just take a snapshot of what's in GitHub right now, push it up there, and that will allow us to close all the other issues and only have the ones that we're in the middle of discussion here that we talked about proposals for. I'd like to do that before it gets too long, just so that all the implementers are using the same copy.
Okay, thanks. Thank you, everyone.